having a conversation with our guest in person of Deyemi Saka, who is a public affairs analyst and PR consultant. He joins us virtually to discuss some of the issues surrounding electoral reforms. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Deyemi Saka, on the program. It's been a delight.
Yeah, good morning. It's nice to be with you, ladies.
Thank
Good
you,
morning.
thank you so much. But
Uh, if you ladies are putting red, I'll probably say come dance with me, but you're putting on pink.
we are so, in fact, the way we have been flattered this morning, it's just amazing. But thank you so much for the compliment. But let's delve straight into the conversation. I'll kick off with this now. According to reports, 4 billion naira was spent on last year's general election, with hopes and expectations dashed. What measures can be implemented to ensure transparency at all levels in electoral funding and campaign finance?
Well, it's whether we like it or not, election is an expensive venture. Seeking political office is also very expensive anywhere in the world. That is why if you finally look at democracy, which is a form of government, that anyway it is practiced, the economy you see on ground, or the form or the type of economy that thrives in such environment is capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Because every investors, whether you like it or not, it's an investment into getting people into electoral offices, and there must be a return on investment, not necessarily through corrupt enrichment, but probably through government patronage. So whether we like it or not, election is an expensive venture,
Mm-hmm.
and you will need money. For the sake of giving it a bit of integrity. Oftentimes, countries and electoral bodies with existing electoral laws put a cap on what you can spend. In some countries, they go further to investigate and put an eye to see how you spend your resources. So I think for us to get it right as a nation, for us to have that electoral reforms that will translate into good elections with integrity, that will give us the kind of government we want, and by extension the governance we deserve. There has to be a cap on what we spend, but we have to be realistic about it. Um, there has to be a bit of control
Mm-hmm.
on the parties, how much they sell their nomination forms,
Mm-hmm.
how they conduct their primaries. But the away from institutions that government institutions that will probably give us that, I think there's a need for us to reevaluate our societal and national values.
Mm-hmm.
Because if our values are right, if our values are good, you don't need to induce me to vote for you. I probably want to vote for the person my conscience says will do good or right. So I think it's a two-way road. It's an expressway. We have to look at governmental reforms, and we have to look at individual and societal reforms in terms of values.
I'm so glad you talked about putting a cap on how much political parties sell their forms. I mean, remember what happened not too long ago, how the APC sold their forms for 100 million naira. But away from that, though, the off-season elections coming later this
Yeah.
year, with the off-season election coming later this year, what mechanisms can be put in place to ensure accurate and timely reporting of election results?
Well, whether we like it or not, the only thing, well, we need to have a system that Nigerians will trust, that you don't have to, one, shut down the whole state or economy because you want to vote. Two, we have to embrace electronic voting, whether we like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, because that brings a bit of transparency. Not that there can be glitches or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But it shows to you that it's more transparent than what we have, the manual collation and canceling and subtraction and deduction. Another thing we could do, but we can't even trust the postal service. You know,
Yeah.
People send packages get missing,
Exactly.
damaged, and so don't let us go there. We are not yet ready for a country that mails their votes, ahead of elections. There's another thing we need to do. Whether we like it or not, successive elections, we've been blocking out a massive voting block, and it's unfair. Essential workers, which includes media practitioners, which include
Health
security
workers.
personnel and medical personnel, they don't get to vote. So I think they should create a window where those people can vote ahead of the elections. Their results are kept safely someplace. Then later, added to the vote on the real dates. At least
Right.
so nobody is cut off or cut out from the process.
That,
You can never tell.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
That we're talking
You can
about
never
all
tell
inclusion
voting
now.
block, that probably could make a guy retain his seat or get out of power.
You're right.
Absolutely. Now
Yeah.
we're talking about an inclusion of everybody in this voting process. And I like what you mentioned earlier, electronic voting. I think we still have a long way to go in, you know, that regard. But in your opinion now, one of the very important or key things that we see in almost every election is voter apathy, vote buying, and a number of other things. But in your perspective, how can vote buying, voter apathy, as well as intimidation during elections be properly managed? Or is it possible for it to be absolutely eradicated?
It's possible to be eradicated because if I don't need to get to the polling booth, because if I can sit down in the comfort of my room with my BVN open, get on this loan app, open an account, and obtain a loan without getting to the fiscal office, and they authenticate my account and give me a loan, and I disburse, and there are no issues. I don't see why it's impossible for me to sit down in the comfort of my room and vote. Yes, the party will tell you that will probably bring another form of vote buying and voters oppression and apathy because people can just go ambush them in their houses or probably pack people and take them to a safe location and say, okay, start
So you
voting
vote
online.
for.
But basically, there's no system that doesn't have a downside. There's no system that cannot be cracked, but it's just safer and better because once you pay me and I tell you, let me go vote privately, you can't tell who I want to vote for. And if electronic voting is embraced, and there's a silly argument that by some politicians saying that the whole country is not covered by all these service providers. And I asked the question, how do you now get videos and images from the remotest parts of Zamfara or Kebbi, on the internet? An average Nigerian is on Facebook. So that the argument doesn't hold water, it doesn't hold ground, it's not valid. So I believe for us to get this right, you should embrace electronic voting. If you cannot vote electronically, then you should probably find a way. Even when you go to the polling booth, it should be electronic. It should be electronic voting. Not that you now vote, somebody will not. Once you're presented as a voter, will just go to the board, some print and go. Automatically go straight to the database. And we need an INEC that would not tell us before the election that it's going to use IRF, and at the end of it now it's
It's something
discretional.
else.
We need to think our electoral. And another thing we should look at is this: whether we like it or not, the political parties play a major role in the conduct of the elections. Because if at that party level you elect somebody that is upright, that have upright moral values, that is not desperate to be in office, I probably wouldn't think that kind of a person would want to get himself involved in deploying his hard-earned resources into vote buying. It becomes a contest of a popularity contest. In China, there is a progression path or channel or route for you that shows you up as a leader for elective office. So I think we should also think as something like that. That it's not just any Tomiwa Dotto and Aliyu that probably would just say, want to become a governor, you probably need to have something in your background, either private or public sector experience before you get into public office. We've been experimenting with our public offices, and has brought us to a disastrous state.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in primary school, I remember Nigeria, India, and Brazil were called developing nations. Pakistan was not even in the mix. China was described then as a country that is just as population and was high poverty rate. Now, China has taken over almost 100 million people out of poverty, and I think they do that almost on a yearly or a decade basis. India is a superpower. India is also a nuclear power. Forget about the optics, forget about what you see. India is also India also has a thriving defense industry. Thriving defense industry that has brought about, a reduction in internal security crises and terrorism and what have you. Brazil has a thriving security defense industry too. In the midst of being in a zone or probably a region that has high criminal activities, drug cartels and what have you, Brazil is relatively safe. And why am I saying this? This is what purposeful, intentional, and tested leadership brought to those nations. But in our case, it's just been one disastrous experiment after the other. I think without me sounding or without me being represented or probably misinterpreted that I'm clamoring for military rule, I'm not and I will not. The best times we had in Nigeria when it comes to infrastructure and development, even policies, were under military rule or regimes and a civilian um, kind of it. When Obasanjo came back into office, Muhammadu Buhari wasn't in such a mode, so let us not go there. So that's my analysis about that.
Deyemi, I don't know what your experience was during the last general elections, but you had polling booths where voters had to wait back from morning, sun up to sundown to guard their votes. And then after election, after voting, it was time for collation, and you had electoral officials having to travel from one part of the country, all of them converge on Abuja, just to announce results. So this is my question. What mechanisms can be put in place to ensure accurate and timely reporting of election results?
You're being generous with your explanation or probably narrative or narration of what happened in the last election. I was on air with a radio station monitoring the elections, and you could imagine that a lot of parts in the Kogi elections did not get to vote. They're disenfranchised. A lot of votes, a lot of wards, especially when it came to governorship elections, lost their lost the rights or probably had their democratic and political way truncated because touts came, destroyed polling booths, and a guy made a statement before the elections, and I must put it out there, Musuli Akinsanya, and the Commissioner of Police Lagos State, because I'm going to use Lagos State as a case study, said it was joking, that I didn't mean it, but we saw the interpretation of probably we saw the aftermath of such statements. Until we speak, he hasn't been even invited for questioning. So we can't have we can't there probably will not be a change of outcomes if we don't rejig or we validate or evaluate or we plan how we conduct our elections. I don't see, like I said, if there's a portal where you can upload, I don't see how 1 million will become 750,000 now from Lagos to Abuja. And what about the bill? Let them just upload the thing on the database. Have a good database administrator. Have good enough firewalls to protect your system, and you're home and dry. But when we are so much in love with hardship, because I remember there was another platform I was up against Festus Okoye.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, it's obvious that INEC is in love with hardship. This kind of hardship that you have to go to a polling booth, physically to maybe a polling unit or whatever, to register, to validate your voting right or status. You have to go there. Like, why now? That you can now do it. We have enough database to sync to make it life easier for Nigerians. We have BVN, we have
NIN and all of that.
NIN, we have multiple things. You have driver's license. I know there's a way we can capture this thing because we have SIM registration that includes your NIN. we can have an idea of a voting population in each region. Then secondly, and I say this, away from elections, we are not serious as a nation because there's no way we can even plan adequately for elections when we've not had a true accurate census in this country.
Very true. The last one was in
I
2006.
don't know. I can't speak for the Quran. I know the book of Numbers spoke about census, counting the Israelites. So we need to count ourselves to be able to know the people in the demography that will vote, people that we're expecting to break into that demography at the next election cycle, to make even INEC prepare enough voting materials. We need to know these things, but it seems we are not just serious as a nation.
Right.
And that's the big truth.
Right.
So there's no kind of reforms or planning we want to have in this country. Without a census, we are not ready, we are not serious. I think we are just probably we are just guesstimating, if I can use that word.
That's a new one.
Right. Now you've hammered so much on how technology can be, leveraged upon to enhance efficiency and sustainability of the electoral process. So because of our time, I'll take you up on this last question in 1 minute. Let's talk about the role of media and civil society groups. Now, what role do the media as well as the civil society groups play in all of this, in promoting transparency and holding electoral bodies accountable?
The simple role they need to play, and when everybody accuses the media or what have you, the media just project to amplify the societal values. If the National Electoral Agency start doing its job, if the religious organizations we have are so seriously involved and engrossed with the biblical, Quranic, or whatever teachings, or Abrahamic or Judaism, whatever teachings they have, will correct our societal values. What that is corrected, what do you need the civil society to do? Nothing. What do you need the media to do? The media will just report the true reflection of the societal values. And that's just it. The media is not to be blamed. The civil society they are not to be blamed. Societies are not to be blamed, sorry. It's just, these are reflections of our societal values. Once we get our values right as a nation, once the government, and this there's no way we want to, there's a saying in Yoruba, there's no way you want to talk about a dog meal or a dog soup that you not talk about the pot used in cooking it. The government of the day needs to create the right perception. If the government when has just got into office, for 6 months, you dare not see a policeman trying to collect bribe on the road. Without investments, PACN there was supplying lights like Jesus was coming the next day. But what changed? So when the government has the right character, the right elements, and sets about the right perception, because perception is key.
Yeah.
If everybody sees that, and that is why, with no sense of unpatriotism, that is the burden we are paying, and we'll keep paying for the perception about President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. A president that doesn't have his primary school, secondary school background, a president that, whether we like it or not, there's a perception that he was involved allegedly in identity theft.
Deyemi,
and all this kind of
these are murky waters that we are delving into right now. We have to bring you back to talk about this particular topic you just delved into, but we have to call it wraps of this particular segment because of our time. You have been awesome on the show. Thank you.
No problem. I wouldn't mind dancing with you. Though you're wearing pink, I'll still dance.
I look forward to that. Thank you so much, Deyemi, for being such a sport. Thank you.